the intelligence coming into UK column from a great many professional people is that the agenda is to create violence on the streets by using division between people over the subject of child abuse. And in particular, the targeted area will be relations between the wider Christian community in this country and Muslims and Asians. And how is this going to be created? We've had retired police warning us about this. We've got retired military people warning us about this. A effectively establishment agenda to have these people at each other's throats, blaming the other side for child abuse. What better example than Thames Valley Police, where of course it has only been the UK column that warned and reported again and again that when a very brave Asian gentleman, a good Samaritan, went to Thames Valley Police some 80 times to report that white men were abusing white children, Thames Valley Police took no proper action and stood in the sidelines while effectively this gentleman was abused, hounded out of his job and victimised. At the same time, of course, there was massive publicity at the convictions of Asians who had been involved in child abuse, and indeed the media such as the BBC took great delight in even going to local mosques to ask Muslims what they thought about child abuse and the paedophiles. And as the Muslims said at the time, why don't you visit churches when the abuse of children is carried out by white people? Well, of course, the reason Britain's media were doing this was in order to create hostility and division between communities. This brings us to Rotherham. This is a little collection of articles. We've got The Guardian here saying the government is to take over Rotherham Council after damning child exploitation report. Notice nobody has been convicted, nobody has been brought into court about this abuse. And here's the BBC. It can't even sort out abuse in its own organisation, but they're happy to promote that 1,400 children have been abused by gangs of men in Rotherham, and in many of their reports, of course, they're happy to brand those people as Asians and Muslims. We've got a headline here in the article I've just shown you. It's loud and clear: networks of Asian men. And yet what we are not seeing is any full and proper investigation by the police as to the gangs of white men, including people in the political circles. That's all being ignored. The Telegraph here, the same thing: 1,400 children exploited by Asian gangs while authorities turned a blind eye. So Asian, 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 but we can make no progress on Elm Guest House. We can make no progress on Dolphin Square. We can make no progress on white abusers associated with British Parliament. Well, let's enter the Crown Prosecution Service. Remember that Crown Prosecution Service under Alison Saunders worked extremely hard to ensure that abuse victim Melanie Shaw of Beechwood Children's Home, Nottingham, was banged up in prison on very dubious charges. She's still there. But here is the Crown Prosecution Service boasting about the Asian names that have been sentenced as a result of child abuse. So the state focus is Asian, Muslim, Islam, paedophilia. That's the message being put across. There is an underlying message that the only abusers are in fact men. Well, this is a lie, because of course statistics show that roughly 50% of child abusers are women, not according to the British press. And we have a focus on the Asian community. We have total protection of abuse rings being run by some pretty powerful white men. Well, that brings us back to the silly man on the train, because here's David Cameron on the left saying, with regard to Operation Bullfinch, the police investigation into the abuse of children in Oxford, more needs to be done to tackle child abuse. But of course it took very brave Simon Danczuk to say, well, actually, this is David Cameron who's saying there's nothing to see, move on, there's no child abuse in Westminster. And Simon Danczuk, we have to say, is apparently coming under vicious pressure from the establishment in order to get him to back off from exposing paedophiles within Westminster, or people who've been previously involved as members of Parliament. A lot of pressure coming on this man. On one occasion in the early days, of course, he had the wheel nuts loosened on the wheels of his car. Deliberate attempt, I would guess, for him to suffer harm or injury. Well, David Cameron is clearly starting to run very worried at the moment, and the UK column reported that he'd been enlisting military police to help protect him. If we just pop him up on screen, Nick, if we can, thank you. There he is. Well, what's he been up to? This was the key bit. As the police start to have internal problems between the police who are covering up child abuse and the police who want to expose it, obviously they're a little bit uncertain for Mr. Cameron. So he's gone to bring in the military police for his protection, and we said that additional Royal Navy personnel are being trained in close protection to support those people. We asked this question some time ago: is he frightened by the British voters, or had he been a naughty boy in Russia? Well, we're going to say that David Cameron has been naughty in both areas, but what seems to be happening now in Westminster is absolute terror as more and more information comes to the surface over child abuse connected with British politicians. And this brings us to the reports of the professionals who've been kind enough to contact us over the last few days, because they believe it's their personal assessments, not factual, but it's their assessments, that there is an agenda to create violence on the streets. And they're saying that that agenda will be focused on Rotherham, and the agenda will be based on accusations of child abuse from the Asian community. Meanwhile, white so-called Christian abusers are totally ignored by the mainstream press and media. This information we thought was so significant that we wanted to make people aware of it. Of course, UK column has consistently said that if we want to correct the political system at the moment, people must remain peaceful, we must keep people together, and we certainly must not allow this devious, subversive criminal cabal in Westminster to undermine relations between good people within communities. So that is our warning today, and I will end on the fact that we have warned time and time again that the real political agenda in this country is treason. Happily, it's not just the UK column that's saying this. This was Breitbart pointing out that when the army may be cut to 50,000, the smell of treason is becoming offensive, and they are absolutely right reporting here that we are witnessing treason. UK column has reported everything from the British military being given to the French, to British students being betrayed to debt, slavery, and public spending decimated to pay for a banking mafia. Let's look at the full horrible picture. Of course, this was a mix of Cameron and Nick Clegg, but we continue to have warned of treason. And if we go back to 2008, with one of our earlier newspapers, we were predicting back then that Britain was going to be abolished. We were warning of treason, and we actually said that the path to the abolition of any form of democracy in this country was the fact that Parliament would be closed on the excuse of refurbishment works. I think we got that right. Well, we'll end you on this. We've been very sad at the disastrous, pathetic reporting by the Daily Mail recently. We shouldn't have been surprised, because in this edition of the UK column, we reported how the Daily Mail ran a major article on the need to get rid of plastic bags and ignored 3,000 demonstrators outside Parliament who were trying to warn that Britain was being subsumed into a dictatorship. There's the word treason again. We've used it time and time again. Our warning today is that from information we are receiving, there appears to be an intent by unknown people within the British government and establishment to help foment violence on the streets. We believe that target area is Rotherham. We believe the subject area is child abuse. We would like to say to people of all colours, backgrounds, religions, do not fall into this trap. It's up to all of us to work together to restore law and order, the Constitution and common law to this country. That's it from me. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you take our warning seriously. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Debt Free TV, in association with GetOutOfDebtFree.org.